Mr. Chancellor, Mr. Chancellor, Mr. Vice Chancellor, Professor Robertson, Mr. Diamond, Mr. Daniel, ladies and gentlemen, I come here this evening because of my deep interest and affection for land settled by the Dutch in the mid-17th century, then taken over by the British, and at last independent. A land in which the native inhabitants were at first subdued, but relations with whom remain a problem to this day. A land which defined itself on a hostile frontier. A land which has tamed rich natural resources through the energetic application of modern technology. A land which was once the importer of slaves and must now struggle to wipe out the last traces of that form of bondage. I refer, of course, to the United States of America. But I'm glad to come here. And my wife and I, and all of our party are glad to come here to South Africa, and we're glad to come here to Cape Town. I'm already greatly enjoying my visit here. I'm making an effort to meet and exchange views with people of all walks of life, and all segments of South African opinion, including those who represent the views of the government. Today, I'm glad to meet with the National Union of South African Students. For a decade, NUSAS has stood and worked for the principles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, principles which embody the collective hopes of men of goodwill around the globe. Your work at home and in international student affairs has brought great credit to yourselves and to your country. I know the National Student Association in the United States feels a particularly close relationship with this organization, and I wish to thank especially Mr. Ian Robertson, who first extended this invitation on behalf of NUSES. I wish to thank him for his kindness to me and inviting me. I'm very happy to have had the opportunity to meet and speak with him earlier this evening, and I presented him with a copy of Profiles in Courage, which was a book written by President John Kennedy and was signed to him by President John Kennedy's widow, Mrs. John Kennedy. This is a day of affirmation, a celebration of liberty. We stand here in the name of freedom. At the heart of that Western freedom and democracy is the belief that the individual man, the child of God, is the touchstone of value, and that all society, all groups and states, exist for that person's benefit. Therefore, the enlargement of society for individual human beings must be the supreme goal and the abiding practice of any Western society. The first element of this individual liberty is the freedom of speech, the right to express and communicate ideas, to set oneself apart from the dumb beasts of field and forest, the right to recall governments to their duties and obligations, above all, the right to affirm one's membership and allegiance to the body politic society, to the men with whom we share our land and our heritage and our children's future. But hand in hand with freedom of speech goes the power to be heard, to share in the decisions of government which shapes men's lives. Everything that makes man's lives worthwhile: family, work, education, a place to rear one's children, and a place to rest one's head. All of this depends on the government. All can be swept away by a government which does not heed the demands of its people, and I mean all of its people. Therefore, the essential humanity of man can be protected and preserved only where the government must answer, not just to the wealthy, not just to those of a particular religion, not just to those of a particular race, but to all of the people. And even government by the consent of the governed, as in our own Constitution, must be limited in its power to act against its people, so that there may be no interference with the right to worship, but also no interference with the security of the home, no arbitrary imposition restriction on the freedom of men to seek education or to seek work or opportunity of any kind, so that each man may become all that he is capable of becoming. These are the sacred rights of Western society. They were the essential differences between us and Nazi Germany, as they were between Athens and Persia. They're the essences of our differences with communism today. I am unadulterably opposed to communism because it exalts the state over the individual and the family, and because its system contains a lack of freedom of speech, of protest, of religion, and of the press. Characteristic of a totalitarian regime. The way of opposition to communism, however, is not to imitate its dictatorship, but to enlarge individual human freedom. There are those in every land who would label as communist every threat to their privilege. But may I say to you, as I've seen on my travels in all sections of the world, reform is not communism, and the denial of freedom, in whatever name, only strengthens the very communism it claims to oppose. Many nations have set forth their own definitions and declarations of these principles, and there have often been wide and tragic gaps between promise and performance, idea and reality. Yet the great ideals have constantly recalled us to our own duties, and, with painful slowness, we in the United States have extended and enlarged the meaning and the practice of freedom to all of our people. For 2 centuries, my own country has struggled to overcome the self-imposed handicap of prejudice and discrimination based on nationality, on social class or race, discrimination profoundly repugnant to the theory and to the command of our Constitution. Even as my father grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, science told him that no Irish need apply. 2 generations later, President Kennedy became the first Irish Catholic, and the first Catholic to lead the nation. How many men of that ability had before 1961 been denied the opportunity to contribute to the nation's progress because they were sons of Italian or Jewish or Polish parents slumbered in the slums, untaught, unlearned, their potential lost forever to the nation and to the human race? Even today, what price will we pay before we have assured full opportunity to millions of Black Americans? In the last 5 years, we've done more to assure equality to our Black citizens and to help the deprived, both white and Black, than in the 100 years before that time. But much, much more remains to be done. For there are millions of Black men untrained for the simplest of jobs, and thousands every day denied their full and equal rights under the law, and the violence of the disinherited, and the assaulted and the injured, looms over the streets of Harlem and of Watts and of the south side of Chicago. But a Black man trained as an astronaut, one of mankind's first explorers into outer space. Another is the chief barrister of the United States government, and dozens sit on the benches of our court. And another, Dr. Martin Luther King, is the second man of African descent to win the Nobel Peace Prize for his nonviolent efforts for social justice between all the races. We have passed laws prohibiting discrimination in education, in employment, and housing. But these laws alone cannot overcome the heritage of centuries of broken families and stunted children, and poverty and degradation and pain. So the road towards equality and freedom is not easy, and at great cost and danger march alongside all of us. We are committed to peaceful, nonviolent change, and that is important for us all to understand, though change is unsettling. Still, even in the turbulence of protest and struggle is greater hope for the future, as men claim and achieve for themselves the rights formerly petitioned from others. And most important of all, although unhappily the government power has been committed to the goal of equality before the law, as we are now committing ourselves to achievement of equal opportunity in fact. We must recognize the full human equality of all of our people, before God, before the law, and in the councils of government. We must do this not because it is economically advantageous, although it is, not because the laws of God not because the laws of God command it, although they do, not because the people of the world wishes it. We must do it for the single and fundamental reason that it is the right thing to do. We recognize that there are problems and obstacles before the fulfillment of these ideals in the United States, as we recognize that in other nations, in Latin America and in Asia and in Africa, have their own political, economic, and social problems, their unique barriers to the elimination of injustices. In some, there is concern that change will submerge the rights of a minority, particularly where that minority is of a different race than that of the majority. We in the United States believe in the protection of minorities. We recognize the contributions that they can make and the leadership that they can provide, and we do not believe that any people, whether majority or minority or individual human beings, are expendable in the case of theory or policy. We recognize also that justice between men and nations is imperfect, and that humanity sometimes progresses very slowly indeed. All do not develop in the same manner and at the same pace. Nations, like men, often march to the beat of different drummers, and the precise solutions of the United States can neither be dictated nor transplanted to others, and that is not our intention. What is important, however, is that all nations must march towards increasing freedom, towards justice for all, towards a society strong and flexible enough to meet the demands of all of its people, whatever the race, and the demands of a world of immense, dizzying change that faces us all. In a few hours, the plane that brought me to this country crossed over ocean and countries which have been a crucible of human history. In minutes, we trace migrations of men over thousands of years. Seconds, the briefest glimpse, we pass battlefields in which millions of men struggled and died. We could see no national boundaries, no vast gulfs or high walls dividing people from people. Only nature and the works of man, homes and factories and farms, everywhere reflecting man's common effort to enrich his life. Everywhere new technology and communications bring men and nations closer together. The concerns of one inevitably becoming the concerns of all. And our new closeness is stripping away the false masks, the illusions of differences, which is still the root of injustice and of injustice and hate and war. Only earthbound man still clings to the dark and poisoned superstition that his world is bounded by the nearest hill. His universe ends at the ritual. His common humanity is enclosed in the tight circle of those who share his town or his views and the color of his skin. It is your job, the task of the young people in this world, to strip the last remnants of that ancient cruel belief from the civilization of man. Each nation has different obstacles and different goals, shaped by the vagaries of history and of experience. Yet, as I talk to young people around the world, I'm impressed not by their diversity, but by the closeness of their goals, their desires, and their concerns, and their hopes for the future. There's discrimination in New York, the racial inequality of apartheid in South Africa, and serfdom in the mountains of Peru. People starved to death in the streets of India. A former prime minister similarly executed in the Congo. Intellectuals go to jail in Russia, and thousands are slaughtered in Indonesia. Wealth is lavished on armaments everywhere in the world. These are different evils, but they are the common works of man. They reflect the imperfections of human justice, the inadequacy of human compassion, the defectiveness of our sensibility towards the sufferings of our fellows. They mark the limit of our ability to use the knowledge for the well-being of our fellow human beings throughout the world, and therefore they call upon common qualities of conscience and indignation, a shared determination to wipe away the unnecessary sufferings of our fellow human beings at home and around the world. Mission. Ooh, wait. Ooh, much better. It is these qualities which make of our youth today the only true international community. More than this, I think that we could agree on what kind of a world we want to build. It would be a world of independent nations moving toward international community, each of which protected and respected the basic human freedoms. It would be a world which demanded of each government that it accept its responsibility to ensure social justice. It would be a world of constantly accelerating economic progress, not material welfare as an end in of itself, but as a means to liberate the capacity of every human being to pursue his talents and to pursue his hopes. It would, in short, be a world that we would all be proud to have built. Just to the just to the north of here are lands of challenge and of opportunity, rich in natural resources, land and minerals and people. Yet there are also lands confronted by the greatest odds, overwhelming ignorance, internal tensions, and strife, and great obstacles of climate and geography. Many of these nations, as colonies, were oppressed and were exploited, yet they have not estranged themselves from the broad traditions of the West. They are hoping and they're gambling their progress on the stability and the chance that we will meet our responsibilities to them to help them overcome their poverty. In the world we would like to build, South Africa can play an outstanding role, and the role of leadership in that effort. It is without it is without question a preeminent re- repository of the wealth and the knowledge and the skill of the continent. Here are the greater part of Africa's research scientists and steel production, most of its reservoirs of coal and of electric power. Many South Africans have made major contributions to African technical development and world science. The names of some are known wherever men seek to eliminate the ravages of tropical disease and of pestilence. In your faculties and councils, here in this very audience, are hundreds and thousands of men and women who could transform the lives of millions for all time to come. But the help and leadership But the help and leadership of South Africa or the United States cannot be accepted if we, with our own countries, but the help and leadership of South Africa or the United States cannot be accepted if we, within our own countries or in our relationships with others, deny individual integrity, human dignity, and the common humanity of man. If we would lead outside our own borders, if we would help those who needed our assistance, if we would meet our responsibilities to mankind, we must first, all of us, demolish the borders which history has erected between men within our own nations, barriers of race and religion, social class and ignorance. Our answer is the world's hope. It is to rely on youth. The cruelties and the obstacles of this swiftly changing planet will not yield to obsolete dogmas and outward slogans. It cannot be moved by those who cling to a present which is already dying, who prefer the illusion of security to the excitement and danger which comes with even the most peaceful progress. This world demands the qualities of youth, not a time of life but a state of mind, a temper of the will, a quality of imagination, a predominance of courage over timidity, of the appetite for adventure over the life of ease. A man like the Chancellor of this university is a revolutionary world that we all live in. And thus, as I've said in Latin America and Asia and Europe and in my own country, the United States, it is the young people who must take the lead. Thus you and your young compatriots everywhere have thrust upon you a greater burden of responsibility than any generation that has ever lived. There is, said an Italian philosopher, nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things. Yet this is the measure of the task of your generation, and the road is strewn with many dangers. First is the danger of futility, the belief that there is nothing one man or one woman can do against the enormous array of the world's ills, against misery, against ignorance, or injustice and violence. Yet many of the world's great movements of thought and action flowed from the work of a single man. A young monk began the Protestant Reformation. A young general extended an empire from Macedonia to the borders of the earth, and a young woman reclaimed the territory of France. It was a young Italian explorer who discovered the New World, and 32-year-old Thomas Jefferson who proclaimed that all men are created equal. Give me a place to stand, said Archimedes, and I will move the world. These men have moved the world, and so can we all. We will have the greatness to bend history, but each of us can work to change a small portion of the events, and the total of all these acts will enter into the history of this generation. Thousands, thousands of Peace Corps volunteers are making a difference in the isolated villages and the city slums in dozens of countries. Thousands of unknown men and women in Europe resisted the occupation of the Nazis, and many died, but all added to the ultimate strength and freedom of their countries. It is from numberless diverse acts of courage such as these that the belief that human history is thus shaped. Each time a man stands up for an ideal, or acts to improve the lot of others, or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope, and crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. Athens shall appear great to you, said Pericles. Consider then that her glories were purchased by valiant men, and men who learned their duty. That is the source of all greatness in all societies, and it is the key to progress in our own time. The second danger is that of expediency, of those who say that hopes and beliefs must bend before immediate necessities. Of course, if we must act effectively, we must deal with the world as it is. We must get things done. That'll be edited out. But there was one thing that President Kennedy stood for that touched the most profound feeling of young people across the world. It was the belief that idealism, high aspiration, and deep convictions are not incompatible with the most practical and efficient programs. That there's no basic inconsistency between ideals and realistic possibilities, no separation between the desires of heart and of mind, and the rational application of human effort to human problems. It is not realistic or hard-headed to solve problems and take actions unguided by ultimate moral aims and values, although we all know sometimes that it is so. In my judgment, it is thoughtless folly, for it ignores the realities of human faith and of passion and of belief. Force is ultimately more powerful than the calculations of our economists or of our generals. Of course, to adhere to standards, to idealism, to the future in the face of the immediate dangers takes great courage and takes self-confidence. But we also know that only those who dare to fail greatly can ever achieve greatly. There's this new idealism, which is also, I believe, the common heritage of a generation which has learned that while efficiency can lead to the camps at Auschwitz or the streets of Budapest, only the ideals of humanity and love can climb the hills of the Acropolis. Third danger is timidity. Few men are willing to brave the disapproval of their fellows, the censure of their colleagues, the wrath of their society. Moral courage is a rarer commodity than bravery in battle or great intelligence. Yet it is the one essential, vital quality for those who seek to change the world which yields most painfully to change. Aristotle tells us at the Olympic Games it is not the finest or the strongest men who are crowned, but those who enter the lists. So too in the life of the honorable and the good, it is they who act rightly who win the prize. I believe that this generation, those with the courage to enter the conflict, will find themselves with companions in every corner of the world. For the fortunate among us, the fourth danger is comfort. The temptation to follow the easy and familiar path of personal ambition and financial success so grandly spread before those who have had the privilege of an education, but that is not the road history has marked out for us. There is a Chinese curse which says, "May he live in interesting times." Like it or not, we live in interesting times. There are times of danger and uncertainty, but they are also the most creative times of any history of mankind. But they're also the most creative of times of any history of mankind, and everyone here will ultimately judge himself. Oh, I see. There's a Chinese curse which says, "May he live in interesting times." Like it or not, we live in interesting times. There are times of danger and uncertainty, but they're also the most creative of any time in the history of mankind. And everyone here will ultimately be judged, will ultimately judge himself on the effort he has taken, contributed to building a new world society, and the extent to which his ideals and goals have shaped that effort. So we part, I to my country, and you to remain. We are, if a man of 40 can claim the privilege, fellow members of the world's largest younger generation. Each of us has our own work to do. I know at times you must feel very alone with your problems and with your difficulties. I want to say how in that's a good. But I want to say how impressed I am with what you stand for and for the effort you're making. And I say this not just for myself, but men and women all over the world. And I hope you will often take heart from the knowledge that you're joined with your fellow young people in every land, they struggling with their problems and you with yours, but all joined in a common purpose. That, like the young people of my own country and of every country that I've visited, you are all in many ways more closely united to the brothers of your time than to the older generation in any of these nations. You are determined to build a better future. President Kennedy was speaking to the young people of America, but beyond them to young people everywhere, when he said, "The energy, The faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it, and the glow from that fire will truly light the world. And he added, with a good conscience, our only sure reward, with history the final judge of our deeds, let us go forth and lead the land we love, asking his blessing and his help, but knowing that here on earth, God's work must truly be our own. I thank you. I seriously thank you for bearing with me through that. Hopefully my voice is better now than it was before. I think that when I read a speech, it helps me like mumble up the jumbo. But okay, I've never made a video before like this, but I'm doing okay. I'm doing just okay. There's a air conditioning on, and it's nice to have air conditioning for once. For once, that's for sure. Oh yes. Um, Working at the Days Inn. Days Inn, that's always fun. Um, let's see what we have going on here. Let's see if I can play my window. Well, I should probably call my mom because they're gone. The whole point of that was so I could call them and say "Hey, could you pick me up something?" But actually have know when she's gonna be here, so I know turn off the air. But here we go, library window, and I will just. I'll call her. Oh, I think. What do I need? They're going to Sam's. I should be can you give me can you give me a pot of Jello? Can you give me ice cream? Oh, ice cream. That would be cool. Hey, what's up? All right. Okay. I was just wondering, are you still at Sam's? Oh, okay. Okay. Um, is there any chance that I could get some hairspray? Oh, fantastic! Thank you so much. Yes, I am. And Elliot is over at Lawrence right now. Yep. Oh, thank you so much. Oh, okay. So are you headed home? Oh, okay. Gotcha. All right. Okay. Well, I'll see you soon. Okay. Thank you. You too. Bye. Yeah, they're on their way. So perfect timing.